Hello, you're watching the Ruslan Belov channel. So there's just 1 week left before the formidable Trump imposes tariffs and sanctions on Russia. By the way, he has already complained that Putin isn't responding to him, that Putin is ignoring his ultimatums and threats. Well, let him cry some more. Meanwhile, the battles continue, and we're getting some very good news. So let's move to the map. And as always, I want to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel if you've watched my videos before and still haven't subscribed. Please do, your subscription helps the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who's already subscribed. Now friends, in the past 24 hours, we've likely witnessed the most important breakthrough of the entire summer campaign. I don't hesitate to use that phrase, so make sure to watch this episode to the end. It's a very important one. The fighters of the center grouping managed to break through right into the center of Pokrovsk. And the breakthrough spans over 5 kilometers, and importantly, these 5 kilometers are through residential areas deep inside Pokrovsk. This is no longer about clashes on the outskirts. The fighting is now in the heart of the city, and videos from the center of Pokrovsk have already surfaced online. Yes, the footage is from the Ukrainian side, showing shelling and active combat. But again, this is from the very center of Pokrovsk. Who would have thought just a month ago that Russian troops would be inside the city center? Let's go in order, not from Pokrovsk. Let's start with Kupiansk. That's another city where battles are already underway. The results here are more modest compared to Pokrovsk, but in the past 24 hours, there have been some changes. US cartographers haven't marked it yet, but I've received information from people on the ground. Firstly, our guys managed to enter Moskovka, a village that is directly adjacent to the city, practically part of it. Secondly, inside Kupiansk itself, our troops gained control over Technichesky Lane and Alexievka Street. Let me clarify, unlike in Pokrovsk, there's no geolocated footage confirming control here, only verbal reports from locals. So we'll wait for objective confirmation, but I'm giving you the information I have. Now, moving closer to Pokrovsk, to the Lyman section of the front. For several days now, steady progress is being recorded there. The Azov fighters stationed in this area are showing their helplessness in the face of our guys. This time, Russian forces advanced 1.7 kilometers from Zelenaya Dolina toward Shandrigolovo. Now, just about 4 kilometers remain to that village, and the area of the advance was 3.2 square kilometers. If we sum up the progress over the past 3 days, our troops have moved the front here by 13 square kilometers, despite the fact that the elite of the AFU are stationed here. But this elite can only retreat. Lyman itself remains a distant target for now. However, by the end of the summer campaign, the front line will likely reach 5 to 6 kilometers from the city. No doubt about that. Now let's go back to the main event of the summer, the breakthrough, into central Pokrovsk. So, Pokrovsk, who would have imagined that Ukraine's defenses would collapse here so quickly and dramatically? Just look, Russian fighters broke through from the direction of Belgika station, pushing past the central market of Pokrovsk. That's right, not just to the market, but beyond it. The last geolocated position is Marshal Moskalenko Street, and the combat footage that surfaced online shows these very buildings on the approach to Moskalenko Street. So it's not just claims, we have objective evidence showing that Russian troops broke into the city center. So how did it happen? Commanders of the center grouping acted very wisely. At first, they didn't storm the city head-on. Instead, they began bypassing the city from the northeast, establishing fire control and possibly later physical control over the main supply arteries, the railway and highway from the north. Then they began infiltrating DRG units, sabotage arch recon groups into the city, which sowed panic among the AFU. Remember the video where Russian fighters shot up a Ukrainian pickup truck on Zashchitnikov Street? That was about a week ago. Since then, a dozen DRG units have snuck into the city. The Ukrainian garrison was constantly stressed and on edge. A few days ago, reports began to surface that the AFU were pulling forces from the south toward the center, building their main line of defense there. This meant that they effectively abandoned the southern part of the city, not completely, but it was no longer their priority. This decision backfired. Yesterday, Russian troops advanced from the Shevchenko district and Belgika station, breaking into the southern part of Pokrovsk and taking it under full control. This includes Pavel Popovich, Kievskaya, Solovinaya, and Ruskaya streets, mostly private houses, with no serious fortifications to slow the advance. Realizing that the AFU defense was weak and could be easily overrun, Russian forces pushed further, across the fields to the village of Troyanda, which sits between two districts of Pokrovsk. This is technically not Pokrovsk, it's a separate settlement between neighborhoods. Ukrainian forces attempted to resist there, but were quickly swept aside. Troyanda came under Russian control, followed by the football stadium, racetrack, and a nearby forest area. Then troops reached Zashchitnikov Street and continued the offensive toward the Central Market Complex, which is both the city center and a fortified defense zone. Last night, reports said fighting had begun in and around the market, where the Ukrainian garrison had concentrated its defenses. But surprisingly, they couldn't hold it. By around 10 p.m., reports said the Central Market was under Russian control, and Russian troops were advancing along Europeyskaya and Shevchenko streets toward the railroad tracks. Also under control is the central bus station. What do we know at this moment? The troops haven't yet reached the railway. They stopped near Marshal Moskalenko Street, next to the Church of Archangel Michael. Only about 500–600 meters separate them from the railway, but regardless, the result is very impressive. When news started pouring in that they had reached the center, taken the market, the railway station of the market, and were advancing beyond that point, I was like, what? Seriously? I knew and had said in previous videos that Russian fighters were already active in the city, but I thought it was mostly DRG units. I didn't expect it to turn into a 5-kilometer breakthrough to the city center. That's wow. As for next steps, the focus will likely shift to clearing the western part of the city. Firstly, we're already pushing from Zverevo. Secondly, the area consists mainly of 1 to 2 story houses, unlike the eastern part, which is full of high-rise neighborhoods. As of now, about 10% of Pokrovsk is fully under Russian control. And this is just the beginning. Konstantinovka direction, July 31st, to the south of Konstantinovka. Chasov Yar is now completely under Russian control. In a titanic effort, the 98th Airborne Division and other units have completed the mission that began over a year ago. Meanwhile, a dramatic situation is unfolding south of Konstantinovka, south of the Klebanbek Reservoir. Russian forces are gradually dislodging the AFU, and yesterday they achieved several important successes. First, from the south, they entered and took control of half of the eastern section of Alexandro-Kalinovo. This means it's now very close to being fully liberated, and likewise to physically cutting off the road to Konstantinovka. Second, they gained a foothold in the southwestern outskirts of Yekaterinovka. Russian forces also crossed the river and reached the railway tracks northeast of Klebanbek. Only about 500 meters remain before the road to Pleshevka is cut off. In short, the Ukrainian group south of the Klebanbek Reservoir will soon be cut off from both sides. Those who don't escape in time will be destroyed or taken prisoner. So I believe this AFU group is living out its final days. And now we turn to another very important section of the front, Chasov Yar. Today, both Western media and Russian sources have confirmed the complete and final clearing of Chasov Yar. This means the city is now fully under Russian control, and this also means that we will soon see a new offensive from here toward Konstantinovka. I believe the battle for Konstantinovka will take place in the fall, and by winter its fate will be decided. The city sits in a low-lying area, which is why the AFU had poured so many forces into defending Chasov Yar, a very important city for them. With the loss of this city, even Ukrainian military experts now admit that the fate of Konstantinovka will be decided very quickly. And from there, it's not far to the key cities of Donbass, namely Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. That's the current update from the Ukrainian front. Let's now move on to the political news. Apparently, both Beijing and New Delhi have made it clear to Washington that they will not give up Russian oil. Even Trump's own uncertainty about whether the sanctions he's preparing will have any real impact on Russia is telling. We're going to impose tariffs and all that stuff that's typically imposed. It may affect them or may not, but maybe it will, said Trump. If it were a case of 100% secondary sanctions against all importers of Russian energy resources, which had been mentioned earlier, those would definitely affect many, including us. But now even Trump himself doesn't seem sure, and based on the fact that he hasn't specified anything, it seems he doesn't even know what sanctions he'll impose on Russia in 10 days. Still, he'll probably impose something, unless he changes his mind. Maybe he'll just go along with the Europeans. Either way, it's meaningless to us. Or maybe it'll be something else entirely. We'll see. Not long to wait now. According to the Legitimately Telegram channel, media operatives took Trump's quote out of context and started spinning it as a supposed victory, but in reality it's a defeat. Even though Trump did say he would impose tariffs and sanctions on Russia in the oil sector, the main point is that Trump is essentially exiting the Ukrainian crisis, leaving it in the hands of what he calls a crippled Europe. Many of our sources believe that Trump is trying to distance himself from Ukraine before it ends in failure. In fact, these 10 days are a window given to Ukraine, not to Russia. After that, things will only get worse for Ukraine. It's a one-way path, just watch. Let's not forget that Russia endured the oil price collapse after 2014, during the Syrian campaign. Western media are turning against Zelensky. The scandal with NABU, National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, has completely undermined trust in him, both domestically and in the West. In an editorial, the Financial Times writes that the president's attempt to strip anti-corruption agencies of their powers has shaken confidence in him both inside the country and abroad. Even though Zelensky quickly realized the scale of his mistake and backed down, many Ukrainians saw the move as a sign of authoritarian tendencies in the government. The outlet reiterates that the true reason for the attack on NABU was the anti-corruption investigations targeting figures close to Zelensky. The very fact of this attack, according to the article, shows what even Kyiv supporters call a growing bunker mentality. In their view, the leadership has gone beyond the necessary wartime consolidation of power and is now using authority to suppress dissent and eliminate alternative centers of influence. Western partners, especially the EU, may have been too tolerant of the erosion of checks and balances by Zelensky's inner circle. They must now take a firmer stance and make it clear that, despite the EU's desire to integrate Ukraine, doing so will require a radical shift in the political culture of Ukraine's ruling elite. The EU is drowning in debt. Europe will borrow billions to buy weapons for Ukraine, writes Politico. European countries are planning to borrow tens of billions of euros from the European Union to finance weapons purchases for Ukraine. Yesterday was the deadline for applying to join the new low-interest credit program for arms procurement. Under the $150 billion European Security Fund, a number of countries, including Belgium, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Estonia, Spain, Finland, Hungary, and Lithuania, have formally expressed interest in these loans. Others, like France, the Czech Republic, Latvia, Bulgaria, and Greece, are also expected to apply. Germany, Sweden, and the Netherlands will likely decline. By pooling weapons purchases through this program, countries can get lower prices compared to buying independently. Even countries not taking loans can still reduce costs by participating in joint procurement. China won't budge. Trump doesn't know what to do about his own threats. Once again, the US president is rattling sabers at Russia and counting down his 10 days. What's interesting is that Trump openly admits he isn't confident in the effectiveness of the tariffs he wants to introduce, according to the Sovereign Economy Telegram channel. The US leader plans to impose 100% tariffs on buyers of Russian oil if the Ukraine situation remains unresolved. This mainly targets India and China. In the past 24 hours, a meeting took place in Stockholm between US Treasury Secretary Bessent and Chinese negotiators. The main topic was a trade agreement, but there were no breakthroughs and no major deals were made. At most, they might extend the tariff truce, but even that hasn't been confirmed yet. It's clear that bullying Beijing, like they did with the EU, isn't working, not even rhetorically. And the same is true for the sanctions threats coming out of Washington. Bessent raised the issue, but was reportedly told that China is a sovereign nation with its own energy needs, and that oil purchases would be based on China's domestic policy. This was later publicly reiterated by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. In short, it's unlikely Trump will intimidate Beijing into submission, and imposing 100% tariffs would also hurt the US economy, potentially driving up global oil prices once again. India has hinted it might look for a new supplier, but if China refuses to follow, is it worth it to suffer alone? Most likely, after the deadline passes, nothing major will happen. We'll just see another round of symbolic sanctions or another delay, but for now it's hard to say anything for certain. So let's use Trump's favorite phrase, let's see what happens.